Hello everyone, this is going to be about a recording on verbs. I'm going to talk about verbs. What are verbs? We have been talking about parts of speech, different categories, and the first one, nouns. After that, I'm going to talk about verbs here. As we know, open class words. Now, verbs also come under the open class category. Actually, one of the four under open class type or content words. Here, verbs are action words. That are, it is very simply to put it very simply, those words which refer to action. And something additionally I give you here, it's about the state of being of the subject in a sentence. Very basically, if you talk, it's about the action. The words give us the notion about action. But one more thing, if you go to a deeper level, more complicated level, it's a state of being. We will talk about that later with some examples. But to talk about action, it's very simple, we know. If I talk about run, think, talk, write, speak, all these are action words. And those are the major examples for verbs at a basic level. But as we know, as usual, we have some categorization. We have some, if you want to say, we have to subdivide it into categories according to certain uh, criteria. Here, the verb is the nucleus of a sentence. That is an additional description on the same. That is, the verb is the nucleus. We talk about nucleus if you talk about some biological cells and all. Or nucleus functions as the major component of the cell. That means that is the functioning part of the cell. Without the nucleus, the cell is nothing. It doesn't function. It becomes defunct. In the same sense, we have the verbs as we have. The verbs usually function as the nucleus of a sentence. And they are the obligatory elements in the predicate of a sentence. All those we may discuss later, but at a basic level, verbs are action words or they refer to the state of being of the subject in a sentence. Okay, and now I would like to talk about the major types of verbs. The first type is the main verbs. Main verbs include action words like work, run, sing, eat, walk, write. All the words I gave as the example in the very beginning itself, because those are the action words which are directly referring to actions that we do. Just think about run, work, eat, walk. All these are directly referring to some actions on the part of a person or on the part of an object, whatever it may be. It's not always, there is nothing, you cannot always say that always the action that is referred only on in connection with the living being. That we will discuss that when we talk about sentence and the different parts of the same. But now at a basic level, we can understand the actions, how actions are directly involved in the examples given by me right now. Now, the second main category is auxiliary verbs, and see the additional way we can refer that. It's another name for auxiliary verbs. Please note down spelling auxiliary. Auxiliary. How can we refer? What is another alternative name for this helping verbs? That itself talks about the very phrase gives the idea about the function or the way it is used or way these verbs are used. They include words like can, is, do, have. Actually, auxiliary verbs are or the helping verbs help the main verbs to form tense, mood, etc. Tense and a mood. Once we come to the topic tense. When we deal with the tense, we will talk about it at a great length, but here also we will come across a basic description. Okay, now let me categorize the main verbs. The first type itself can be subdivided into mainly into two, and those again get subdivided. How does that happen? Let us see. Main verbs. Main verbs, the major division goes like intransitive and transitive. Just to understand this, it's just about whether the main verb takes an object or not. That is the basic idea. If you talk about the definition, if you just to begin or just attempt the grasping with the definitions, these parts will look like something very typical. But if you take the example and then go back to definition, it becomes more easy. Let us do that. Let us try with that. So here main verbs. I told you the major category, the first type main verb, the major categorization goes like intransitive and transitive. And the first intransitive is subdivided into verbs of being, verbs of action, and the transitive gets subdivided into monotransitive and ditransitive. We will talk about that later. But what is intransitive and what is transitive? How main verbs get categorized as these two in the beginning. Let us see. So I'm going to take a few sentences in which we can mark down the main verbs and the objects, all which are necessary for us to talk about main verbs, transitive, intransitive, and the definitions, everything. We have some examples in the mode of some sentences here. Let's see that. First sentence reads like, I sing. The first thing is about identifying the subject in the sentence. I sing. Which is the subject? I. I is the subject of the sentence. And what about the main verb? What is the action done, performed by the subject? That is the main verb, the action. I sing. What do? I sing. So this is the main verb. And here the explanation or an additional comment is here. We can read it then. The main verb sing does not take any object. Let us see whether this is a sentence that is complete in itself, or is it just a group of words. I gave you the definition of a sentence, and it was already told how just a few group of words will not comprise a sentence. For a sentence to be a sentence, or for a group of words to be a sentence, it should bring a complete sense. And here, I sing is obviously a sentence that gives complete sense. It gives the complete idea about the action performed by the subject. So, I sing. That's perfect in itself. But what is the extra comment added here? It is the main verb sing does not take any object. Okay, fine. Let us see. I sing. After that, there is nothing or nothing additionally. There is no object. And what is an object? We will see with the second sentence, the same kind of sentence. I sing a song. It is written with an additional extra detail, and I sing a song. Obviously, again in the same sentence, here I is the subject, sing is the main verb, but there is something additional here. I sing what? A song, and definitely that is the object of the main verb. And that is how we are going back to our major categorization. Main verb, the first type is intransitive, without any object for the main verb. I sing. But what about transitive? In the second sentence example, the same main verb becomes a transitive verb with just one object. Okay, monotransitive means only one. Mono means one. A main verb which takes object is called a transitive verb. If it has only one object, it is a monotransitive verb. If it has two objects, then it becomes ditransitive. Very simple. So I sing a song and a lullaby. Then two objects. Here the main verb, the same main verb becomes, if you have another one more object, it becomes ditransitive. If you have only one object, it becomes monotransitive. If the same main verb does not take any objects, still it completes the sentence. It is just intransitive without any object. So what can we understand from this? This is another lesson we can have from here. That is, you cannot always say you take a main verb, an action word, and say that this is a transitive verb, this is an intransitive verb. You cannot label that in that way. Only by looking at the sentence, only by checking out whether in this or that sentence this main verb takes or does not take an object, this becomes, or you can label, you can decide whether it is intransitive. That means whether it takes an object or not, or whether it is transitive. By taking an object or two or more objects, then you can decide accordingly. So second example also you saw there with the same main verb. In the first sentence it is an intransitive verb, but in the second sentence by taking an object, additional object, it becomes a transitive, and to say specifically, it becomes a monotransitive because only one object, and we know mono as a term refers to one. Di as a term or an additional, it refers to something, the number two. Okay, it refers to number two. That's all. Then the third one, she works hard. See here, she works hard. Please identify the subject here. She is the subject who functions or performs an action. She works hard. Or the subject as it is something about she. That is the, obviously she is the subject in the sentence. Okay, next we can identify the main verb, the action she performs. It is works. Obviously works is the main verb. What about heart? Actually, a full stop is needed. She works hard because it's a sentence. She works hard. You see here, I sing a song. She works hard. And can we say she works hard after this main verb? A word comes, and can we take this as an object? Definitely no. That's why I have given this. The sentence is added to avoid the confusion or to bring more clarification. She works hard, you can have again in the position of I, here it is she. In the position of sing, you have another main verb, works. But what about hard as a word? It is not at all an object. That is, the object should be something which that action has some effect on that or something to do with. Here it is just the way she works. We will talk about adverb in the coming videos, and then we will understand what this hard. It's hard is just an additional description on the way she works. It's not at all an object of the action. As you talk about us, I sing what she works, not what. It's just how does she work. She works hard. It's just a description on the way she works. It's not at all something, it doesn't have anything to do with the impact of the action she performs or the subject performs. So we should never be confused in between deciding objects. So it makes it clear, it brings the clarity that just an additional word after the main verb, you cannot say that it's the object or the verb is transitive with some object. No. So this is an example that gets us the idea, makes it more clear to say first. And what about the fourth sentence? Anu eats meat. This is an additional example to make the Make it more clear. That's all. Anu eats meat. Please identify the subject. Anu is the subject because Anu performs the action of eating. Anu eats. So eats is the main verb. Anu eats what? Meat. Only one object. So this is a main verb with the one object. So this is transitive verb with the one object. Anu eats meat. Now just take the fifth example. Mother brought me this book. Mother is the subject because she performs the action. Mother brought is the main verb. And also we know main verbs can have V1, V2, V3 forms. It's all we have already come, we always come across all this, but we have by dealing with the parts of speech at a deeper level, we get more clarity regarding orientation of what we know from here and there. We may be aware of all these in a scattered manner, scattered fashion. But here we are trying to make it more in an oriented fashion to make the things more organized into some categories, some under some topics, so that things are more clear. Okay, that's all with it. So we know bring, brought. As the action is there in the past, it's referred in the past tense. It's mother brought me this book. Mother brought. Then first thing, whom, first object. Mother's bringing the book. The first object is the person, me, as the first object. What does she bring? This book. So that is the second object. So here this main verb is again a transitive with the two objects. So that this is definitely a ditransitive verb. This is the way it comes into being. And again here you can definitely identify intransitive verbs are verbs without an object and transitive verbs are verbs with the objects, and a verb can take one object or more than one object. So according to that, the number of objects a main verb takes, you can decide whether it is monotransitive or ditransitive. Now we can go back to intransitive, two of the categories of intransitive verbs. Yeah, intransitive verbs are of two types. All these descriptions are just about the description that I gave in as part of the description in the video also. That's all. Okay. Yeah. Then intransitive verbs are of two types. First one, it's verbs of being. See here, verbs of being, verbs of action. Verbs of being. Obviously, we know verbs of intransitive verbs are without objects. Intransitive. We take that intransitive in as a negative, so that there is no object. Transitive as something positive, so in, there is no in. So it's about intransitive. Transitive, intransitive without objects. In that way, we can remember it easily. Yeah, first one, verbs of being. Okay, verbs of being. Yeah, being as a term, definitely, it refers to state of being. Or in a way, it's a kind of status. A kind of being as a term, we have the notion, very basic notions about a condition, the state, the way we are. That's all. And these are verbs that refer to a state of being or condition. Yeah, let us go back to, let us first think about the example. Renu is a nice girl. Here, Renu is the subject. What about the verb of being in the sentence? Yeah, she is a nice girl. Renu is a nice girl. Nice girl is just the subject complement. But is functions as the verb of being. Her state, her being what? A nice girl. That is referred just with the verb of being in the sentence, that is. That is not actually any, that doesn't take any object as such. Here it is just subject complement. That again refers to Renu, the subject itself. Renu is the subject. A nice girl definitely refers to Renu. It's not at all the object of the sentence. And there is no action as such. It's just about a state of being or condition. Renu is singing. It's not as you say Renu is singing, Renu is crying, Renu is eating. There is no such main verb in the mode of an action coming there, but verb of being. The main verb in that verb of being. So the second type verbs of action is exactly there as something entirely different. That's why verbs of being is different from verbs of action, or we have different categories as such. Let us see. Yeah, another example. She became a nurse. She became a nurse. Also another example for that same. She is the subject. Became a nurse. A nurse is the subject complement. She, same thing. Same woman is reproducing a nurse here. But in between you have the reference to her being. What is she? We get the idea from this particular verb of being. She became a nurse. Okay, so of course an action is involved. She studied for becoming a nurse, but now it is about the became as a verb refers to her being only. It's not about the direct action of studying, teaching, learning, singing, nothing. So that is the way you can talk about being as the verb of became as the verb of being in this sentence. Okay, so that is clear. And this is actually next there is as this part refers to subject complement. This actually doesn't have much to do with the verbs of being. Normally in classes, I do not go for discussing this as part of the uh, particular topic, but here if you want you can just have an idea about an object complement is. Just place it out of the discussion on verbs of being, but we elected you our leader. We, subject. Elected, main verb. You, of course, object of the action of this election on the part of we. Okay, we elected you, our leader. So, you as a word is the object here, and the phrase our leader again refers to this object itself. So, our leader, object complement. The university appointed Mr. Ram the vice chancellor. The university is the subject. This example is very important in the mode of our understanding or being convinced that not just human beings or animals can be the subject, but a university, a college, a tree, a bird, anything can be the subject of some actions or some sentences. Yeah, here the university appointed. University is not a person, but still it is the action. It is under the under its premise, under its sovereign rule, power, appointing a person. Mr. Ram is then Mr. Ram becomes the object of the action of appointment. So university appointed Mr. Ram. So now you can understand from this sentence, Mr. Ram is the object of this action. So Mr. Ram, the Vice Chancellor, in that case, the Vice Chancellor refers to the object of the action in this sentence. So we can have a basic idea about what the object complement is. As that is referred here, the subject complement is given as an example. Above, we have an additional content that refers to object complement. That's all. Actually, that doesn't have much to do with the verbs of being. Please don't be confused. Okay. Yes. Then, now just last part, the verbs of action. If you are confused, I will go to the chart again. Intransitive main verbs, intransitive, transitive, verbs of being, verbs of action. Transitive, of course, one, two, or more than one, mono, die. Here, verbs of being, it is over. Now we have to talk just about verbs of action. These all come from the first type main verb. And under main verb, the last type I'm going to talk, verbs of action. Just let us go to that verbs of action. That is not to be discussed because this is already given as the basic example. These are verbs that refer to an action. It is possible to refer to actions without the use of an object. Okay, that is already told there. My students laughed. Do we need an object? No. My students. This is again, we can see how a subject, which is the subject in the sentence. It's not my, it's my students together. All of them together comprise the subject of the sentence. My students laughed. Here there is no need of an object to refer to the action. There are verbs, or these are verbs that refer to an action without the use of an object. My students laughed. No object needed. No additional support needed to finish that idea, to complete the idea, to get the sense. The dog barked. Completed action in itself. There is no object needed. So these are verbs of action in intransitive category, the second type, apart from verbs of being verbs of action without having any object. Okay, the child cried. The child is the subject, cried is the action. There is no need of any other object or anything to complete the sense. Okay, the dog barked. In itself, the dog is the subject, barked is the main verb. So, verbs of action without having any object. The need of any object, without the need of any object, the action is completed in itself and they are self-sufficient in itself. Okay, sorry, self-sufficient in themselves. That's all. Yeah. Then the second main division, that is under main verbs, we have all the subdivisions and the descriptions given as such. And auxiliary verbs, I told you, helping verbs, those are helping verbs. The main definition goes like auxiliary verbs from the very alternative name itself, we can understand. I told you it's helping verbs. They help main verbs to form tense, mode, etc. And auxiliary verbs are again subdivided into primary and secondary auxiliaries. Actually, with the tenses, we have to go for the deeper analysis of these types. But here, as part of the discussion on verbs, we cannot avoid talking about them. Primary auxiliaries. So that let me just talk about the primary basic forms are be, do, and have. And as a kind of uh, forms or out of that, a derivation, if you want to, be. From be we get am, is, are, was, were, be, been. All these are not really, we are not really unfamiliar with all these. But we may not, or sometimes we may not be aware from where all these come from. Actually, all these are the sub varieties of the primary auxiliary form called be. And next type it is, next one is do. You are not unfamiliar with the do, does, did, done. All these are sub-varieties of do from the primary auxiliary source be, do, and have. Again, have, has, had, having. We are not unfamiliar, but we have to know these come from the second main type of verb, that is auxiliary verbs, the primary type, and be, do, have, and sub-varieties. There are different forms of the major primary auxiliaries called be, do, and have. Okay, yes. And what about the secondary auxiliaries? These are also not really unfamiliar for us. Will, shall, can, may, and their past forms like will, would, shall, should, can, could, may, might, must, dare, need, and many others if you want to. But major secondary auxiliaries, these can be listed out. So this is all with the verbs as the parts of speech. So I tell you, go back to the basics. Parts of speech, open class or content words, closed class or structure words, Until under open class, nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, and the first video I told about nouns, talked about nouns. Here it is about verbs. Next video shall be on adjectives. Thank you so much for listening.